Good day, everyone. My name is John Megling, and I'm on the system engineering team, specifically the Microsoft Azure team at Tech Data Corporation. And today we'll be talking about Azure Migrate. We have our email address here so you can email us if you have questions. So what is Azure Migrate? Azure Migrate provides a centralized hub, basically a place to do your migration, track it, a unified platform, single place to go to manage your migration to Azure from on-premise. And these are some links I put in that I thought would be helpful. If you want more information about Azure Migrate, you can definitely go here and get that information from Microsoft directly. They have great documentation regarding Azure Migrate. And really there's 4 phases to Azure Migrate that we're going to cover today. The portal setup and prerequisite checks, setup of the configuration server, discovery and assessment phase, and the actual migration phase. So with that, let's go ahead and get to it. We need to start our migration journey, and we need to go to the portal, the Azure portal. And we go to portal.azure.com. If this is your first time, again, it's portal.azure.com. If you haven't set that up, you'll need to set up an account and a tenant. But once you have that all set up, we go there, we log in with our credentials, and then like anything in the Azure portal, we can simply just search for what we're looking to do. In this case, we're going to go ahead and search for Azure Migrate. You can see it comes right up. And we're presented with some options here. Just kind of bounce through these options so you can see what's going on. Different options we have with the Azure Migrate server. Again, just showing you some of the tabs that we have in this service. This is an initial portal setup, that we have to look at and get familiar with before we start our journey. The one we're going to be working with is the Windows and Linux servers migrate piece today. The access and migrate servers piece. Go ahead and click into that. The first thing we need to do is go ahead and get started there and go ahead and add the tools that we want to use. We're going to need to create a resource group in Azure. We can create a new one. We can do that work ahead of time, or we can go ahead and create it here. You can see we have some existing resource groups. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. Get used to naming conventions. Try to name things that make sense to you so that you can find them easily within Azure. You can always search for resources too. But we're going to create our group, and then we're going to give it a name for our Azure Migrate project. And in this case, I'm in the United States, but if you are in other countries, obviously Azure Migrate, and Azure itself works, all over the world. So here we're going to pick our tools. Notice there are other tools besides Microsoft. Today we're going to be focusing on the specific Microsoft tools and just show you some of the ones that are here. Cloudomize comes up quite a bit with our partners also, but today we're focused on the Azure Migrate server assessment. We're going to go ahead and hit next. Definitely want to add that tool. You can see it supports Windows and Linux. It's agentless. And we'll get a roll-up screen that says what we're going to want to do. Always good to check that and make sure you're doing what you think you're doing. And we'll go ahead and hit Add Tools, and notice it'll initialize the deployment for Azure Migrate. The deployment's in progress. And we can track that progress right here from the Azure portal. You can see our deployment succeeded, and we now have our Azure migration project started. Now we've got our initial project started, our Azure Migrate project started in Azure. Let's go ahead and take a look at actually getting this project underway and some of the things we need to do. And remember, we talked about the phases of the Azure Migrate. We got, Discover is where we're going to start. And Microsoft gives us a good roll-up of where we need to go. So definitely pay attention to this. We have Hyper-V or VMware. From this point on, we're going to be taking a look at the steps to actually work with a VMware vSphere VMware environment. So just like the other environment with Hyper-V, our steps are very much similar. We're going to need to download the Azure Migrate appliance, or what you may hear me refer to as the Azure configuration server. Once we get that appliance downloaded, It takes about 30 to 40 minutes to download that file. We're going to need to unzip it, and it comes in a VMware format. Then we're going to need to go into the actual VMware environment and use our VMware tools to actually create a virtual machine in that VMware environment running the appliance. And then we're going to take a look at configuring the appliance and starting the discovery from a web browser. So I'm not going to show today the download and the actual creation of the appliance. I'm sure everyone familiar with VMware is very familiar with doing those steps. We're going to jump straight to configuring the appliance and starting the discovery and going from there. So hopefully that works for everyone, and we'll go ahead and jump into that. Another thing to note of great importance here is this prerequisites link that Microsoft provides here. That gives us all the documentation we need, because there are some things we need to do in the VMware environment to prepare for the configuration server and get that all up and going. So with that being said, always check the prereqs and we'll get started on this migration. So at this point, I've already used the vSphere client or the vSphere web client to load the virtual machine into the VMware environment, our configuration appliance, our Azure Migrate appliance, and now I've turned it on and we're just booting it up for the first time. It's also very important to remember to look at the prereqs for the product. That way you get all the steps down that you need to do ahead of time regarding permissions, things like that in your environment. This is a license agreement. Pretty standard thing for Microsoft, saying what we can and cannot do with this Azure Migrate appliance. And we're going to need to create a username and password. But again, I can't strongly recommend enough that you look at documentation from Microsoft and the links that I provided in the intro, so you can actually make sure you have the environment set up correctly so you can get to this point with no flaws. So as you can see, basically it's a Windows server. And we're going to go ahead and log in with that password we created. And I always like to verify the version against what I think I have. And we do need internet connectivity, so again I had to square that away and make sure that works. So you need to make sure before you get in your web browser that you have internet connectivity. And we do, so we're good. It's a web-based appliance, so we're going to use this interface to configure and start our discovery. So we go ahead and check these boxes and get this started. We're checking the internet connectivity that I talked before. If you have a proxy server, you can set that up here and make sure you're connected to the internet and that all works out good. Check this takes a little bit, and once it's checked, then time is always very important. Make sure your server's got the correct time and it's synced with an internet time server. And notice we do need to basically download a VMware Sphere, a virtual disk development kit, and we need to install that, and then we're going to need to verify that that's installed on our VMware environment. Pretty should be a basic thing to do for a VMware administrator. So I downloaded it and then installed it, and then we just did the check and we confirmed. So now I want to register this appliance with Azure. So we're going to log in to our Azure environment. We're going to need to make sure we have an account that has the appropriate rights in the Azure environment, so that we can create the resources we need for Azure Migrate. Again, that's covered in the documentation that you can get right off that main screen that we showed when you downloaded the appliance for those prereqs, and the links I provided in the beginning of this document. Also link you to the documentation that talks about that. So we're logged into our Azure environment. We're connected. This was the tool that we needed to download, install, and verify, which we did. And now we're going to pick a subscription. I have two with the same name in our environment, so hopefully I get the right one here. And I usually don't the first time. I usually have to go and change it, and of course, like always. Then our project that we created, we're going to go ahead and select that Azure project that we created. If you can't remember that, just go back and check. But it does remember it for you, so it's there. Our appliance name that we're going to use, I like to use the server name itself. You can use any name that works for you here that follows those guidelines. I'm going to go ahead and register the appliance with the Azure tenant. So we're good there, all registered. Now we're going to specify our vCenter server that we're going to connect to. So we can use the server name or the IP address. In this case, I'm using the IP address. And an account with administrator level privileges to that VMware environment, so we can do the discovery through that on those virtual machines. We're going to validate that connection. Hopefully we're validated, and then we can go ahead and save that configuration and start our discovery. Discovery will take a second, then it'll bounce up and tell us, basically we have to wait a little while for, not a little, like it's roughly a minute or two per machine to actually, discover that process. There it is. So now we've got our discovery going and completed. We need to go back in the Azure portal into our Azure Migrate piece and take a look at what we've discovered. So we look at our assessment tools and the discover piece. Notice there's some servers there. Let's take a look at those servers. I'm doing other projects here, so we're going to switch this to the VMware environment that we're using, and we can see our 2 VMware servers are there, and that's a good thing. So that helps us further along down the path of getting this done. So then we need to create a group in order to assess these machines. We could use the existing group and add the servers. We'll just go ahead and create a new group for this VMware environment. And the appliance name that we're working with. Go ahead and pick our 2 machines. We don't need to pick the actual appliance, and we're going to go ahead and create that group. And that was a success. Lets us know what's going on there. Now we see both our groups in our group, and there's our machines. And now we need to focus on the assess part of it. So we want to assess the servers and see what they look like and see what Azure is going to recommend, see if there's any issues, those kinds of things. So we're going to head and machines discovered from Azure. We're going to give it a name for the assessment. You can use any name you like here. Again, try to be descriptive. That way it helps you later when you're trying to organize everything and find things. And we're going to go ahead and grab that group that we created. There's our machines. Make sure everything's there that we want. Then we just have to create that assessment. So the assessment's being computed there. We can track what's going on within the Azure portal itself and go ahead and refresh that. We can see that one assessment has showed up. The assessment, good thing to remember, you do want to run this over a period of time. I'm showing it very quickly here, but you want to run this during business hours for a time you're comfortable with. That way you can get a good overall look at what the machines are doing, and what their role is, and what, because Microsoft's going to make some calculations based on what those machines are doing. And you can see here some of that assessment data that Microsoft provides regarding the machine storage, the readiness for Azure, our machines are good to go, and the general cost assessment. And we can export that out, recalculate it, create other assessments, things like that. We can drill down into this one and take a look where it's breaking down the VM sizes that it's going to create in Azure. We can drill into that and get even more information, number of disk, size of the target disk, things like that help us evaluate, whether we want to go with those defaults that Microsoft recommends or make changes, those types of things. So as we can see, we're still in the phase of making things happen. We're going to need to replicate those machines. In this case, we're going to be working with VMware. And we're going to grab our appliance. And we want to go ahead and apply those migration settings from our assessment. And we're going to pick that group in our assessment that we found. We're going to highlight our machines and grab those. And then we're going to go ahead and pick a region. In this case, I'm working in the West US, but obviously we support all the Azure regions that are supported for US customers. And we want to pick our correct subscription. I'm going to grab our resource group that we created and our virtual network that the machines are going to replicate and fail over into, and then the default subnet off of that. Here we can pick licensing if we already own it. In this case I don't. These are our machines. We can take a look at the recommendations again from Microsoft, make changes there if we want. Get our OS disks squared away, that way we know we're good there. And next we're going to go ahead and put some names in that are friendly to the Azure environment. I had to make some changes there to mine. Double check our disk piece. Make sure all the disks, you can see we're replicating not only the C drive but also some additional data drives there. Pick our hard drive types that we want. Make any changes we need. And go ahead and start that replication. Notice like it's going to tell us we're initializing that deployment. And we can, in the Azure portal go and track that progress of that deployment. Lots of information in the portal from Microsoft to help us understand what's going on. You can see what's happening there. Our deployment's underway, which is good. I forwarded it ahead here. Our deployment's complete. And we can see the things that are happening. Everything's successful, and it's starting the replication of those two machines that I have in the VMware environment on premise. Looking good so far. Everything's successful. Our replication is completed, and we have two protected virtual machines. So at this point, we haven't migrated them yet. We've just done the replication. We're going to go back in and take a look real quick at what we've got. Go ahead and refresh. Get used to refreshing that a little bit. If not, you'll think things that you did didn't come up when they actually did. So we can see we have our replicated servers here. We can change that to the appropriate appliance, and there's our two machines, and we're ready to do a test migration, or actually go ahead and do the actual migration. So we're cooking right along. So now that we have our replication set up and everything's good and we're healthy, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the test migration. And then we'll do an actual migration. So in test migration, we're going to go ahead and bounce into that. We're going to pick our network that we want to migrate over to. Sometimes this is normally not your production network in Azure, but like a test network for validation. You can see it starts at the test migration. We can go ahead and show you that again with this other machine. That way we get them both going at the same time. And we can check the status of it as this migration is happening. You can see everything went well. It gives us even timestamps. I'm forwarding things ahead a little bit here, for the sake of time in the video that we're working on. But our test migration is successful. We do some further testing. Go look at the machines, make sure our databases, our things are working that correctly, that we wanted to work right. We go and validate these machines that they're actually up and running. The Azure portal, as I'm showing here, there's our two machines. We can see they're running. But you definitely want to validate, connect to them, validate that your apps and are working correctly. The connections between the servers are all valid. You can see we have CPU activity, disk operations, things like that. So we're looking good. So after that validation, we just go back into the Azure portal. Or not in the Azure portal, into the Azure Migrate piece. And we go ahead and look at our test migrated servers. And we need to clean up our test, so we're going to go ahead and do that and clean that up. All that's doing is getting rid of those VMs, cleaning up the test environment, and bringing it back to just our replicated environment ready for migration. We go ahead and just tell it that everything was okay. We're going to need to do that for both machines. And it won't take very long at all for that cleanup to happen. We can track that progress of that cleanup. And once our cleanup is successful, we're prepared to migrate. So as long as we've done everything we need, we can start migrating these servers from on-premise into Azure. So we go back into our Azure Migrate tool, go to our Servers tab, look at our replicated servers, make sure we're looking at our VMware machines, which we are. We're going to go ahead and do an actual migrate this time and get these machines moved. Shut down the machines, or not on-premise. Typically you will want to shut them down. You don't want the same machine running twice normally in a production environment. We can start that for both of those. And we can, like everything in Azure, we can track the progress, we can get logs, statistics on what's going on. I'll forward this to you and you can see everything was successful, our checks were good. And then we'll take a look at our virtual machines. And we're going to see our two machines, and then we'd want to validate again that everything's working correctly in our apps and our databases and everything's good to go. And that's it for Azure Migrate and VMware. So just to wrap everything up, I'm going to throw our information back up here. Feel free to reach out at this email address and contact me directly. A reminder again of what Azure Migrate does and what it provides. And just what we went through today. The portal setup, the prereq checks, set up the configuration appliance, discovery, assessment, migrate. And I'd really just like to thank everyone for watching our videos.